Well, boils and ghouls, it's your old pal, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Welcome back to Horror Heals. On this episode, we're talking to a very talented artist, Jennifer Ginty, who has created what she calls Moody Monster, which is this stuffed animal of sorts that the head and the legs and the arms come off. It's really designed for kids and for people who are just feeling really, really anxious or stressed at that moment. Instead of punching a wall or tearing up a book
or screaming,
well, I guess you can scream while you're tearing Moody's arms and legs off, too, if it makes you feel better. You're going to understand really, really quickly what a special person she is, and so brave for opening up about past traumas and her childhood. And just to give you all a little bit of a trigger warning, we do talk a little bit about abuse as a child. We just want to let you know ahead of time in case that's something that's going to be too triggering for you to listen to the episode. But Jennifer is just a light and can't wait for you guys to meet her. So here we go. Welcome to Horror Heals.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Absolutely, we are too. So just to start off, how does our theme of horror movies and horror culture helping us with our mental health relate to you and your life?
I grew up in a horror family. We were all horror addicts. People could also say I lived in a horror situation in my family. I lived with my two brothers, my mother and my father, who was very abusive. He was our abuser. Throughout my childhood, I was drawn to horror. My brothers were constantly watching it, so I was constantly seeing it as well. But I was drawn to it, especially reading-wise.
Okay.
I was reading Stephen King in 4th grade, which a lot of people nowadays are like, whoa. My family would pass down horror books, Clive Barker, and we'd be all reading them at the same time. For horror movies, we were just always watching them on our VHS and going over to Blockbuster and grabbing our videos. It was just part of our lives. But it was also something that really saved me in times in my life that have been really difficult. I have complex PTSD and depression. And when I have my PTSD moments, when I have a depressive moment, it's actually very calming for me to watch a horror movie. I'll throw on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is my favorite, or Nightmare on Elm Street. They're comforting to me. And I appreciate it. And I know that horror spans so many genres. It spans so many cultures. That's another great draw for me because I feel like watching Italian horror, watching Japanese horror, which my brothers used to show me all the time. I really loved the cultural aspect of it as well.
Did you say that your depression and your PTSD, that stems from the childhood upbringing, what happened in the household?
When I was 14, my brother finally told a trusted adult about what was happening in our home. My abuser was taken out of the home, which my whole childhood was pretty traumatic, but then I was thrown into a whole other trauma of having to go into the court circuit. Criminal case, that kind of thing. And we were treated as if we were a problem, not trustworthy. It took me a while to talk about my abuse. When I finally did tell them, they thought I was just doing it to add to it, that I wanted to be seen and heard. They put me in front of a grand jury to talk about horrible things that had happened in our family. A lot of people, they don't understand that once a child is taken out of a traumatic situation, that it doesn't stop there, that it continues through. And children really need things that are comforting to them so they can have respite from the trauma they keep going.
I'm just curious if there was mixed emotions, because you said you grew up in a household where everybody liked horror and shared books and stuff, and it was also comforting for you. So is it like a mixture of like bad feelings / good feelings just because of the situation you were in?
No, I think that's not something that really bothered me. I think it was an important part of my growth. I found characters that I felt in touch with. And I know a lot of other people have that as well. I found comfort in the comedy of it. I am a huge Evil Dead fan. I almost named my son Ash, but yes, my husband at the time didn't want to. I told my son when we were watching Evil Dead 2, and he was like, "Oh, I wish you named me Ash." I find comfort in those characters. Freddy was actually quite a funny character. He was an actual abuser. And that is something that can be hard for someone. It can be triggering to know the background. But if you push that aside, he's really a pretty funny character as who he is after life, right? He always has a little quip before killing someone.
Yeah, I think they probably, after the first few movies became so successful, there were marketing meetings like, let's downplay the whole child abuser thing and maybe push up the funny stuff a little bit, because that kind of got pushed to the background for the later films.
I just found that finding those characters and enjoying those moments, and it doesn't even have to be certain characters. There can just be movies that I connect with because I need something to ground me. That's something that I've found that horror does for me as well. It really grounds me. A lot of people with PTSD have opposite effects from what neurotypical people will have. Jump scares do not bother me. There are maybe 2 or 3 jump scares in my life that got me. Sinister, the lawnmower. That was one of them that got me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't have that trigger that a lot of people have with jump scares. Maybe it's because I was in hyper focus of waiting for what could happen in my life, in my childhood.
Right.
So I developed that. And so it works for me. It helps to relieve those PTSD symptoms.
Does your love of horror and your situation, do you have conversations with people in your adult life who don't like horror, who don't get horror, and try to get them to understand how it can be helpful?
All of my friends will not allow me to pick movies. My friends are like, no, you don't get to pick the movie. Because I will pick something. I picked the menu for me and my best friend, and she was like, what the hell are we watching? I'm like, what's the matter? This is nothing crazy. So my friends are like, no, you're not allowed to pick movies for us anymore.
That one was hard for me. I don't even know if I finished it.
I don't think they did.
I went through that like it didn't bother me, and I honestly didn't think of it much as a horror movie, but it really is.
Yeah. As you said, there are so many different genres, so many different styles. Kendall and I have discussions back and forth about what is horror and what isn't horror. I think we're all about the same age. Last night we were rewatching the 80s movie Troll that was on HBO like in 5 minutes. Yeah. And he's like, that's not horror.
I like it, but it's like, I don't know if I was ever scared of that.
For a little kid, it's cheesy, but the scene where the troll turns Sonny Bono into a garden could be scary for a kid. I was such a chicken as a little kid. That's the kind of thing that would get me when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, that I would be creeped out by that kind of thing.
Do you have like genres that are very triggering for you?
He does.
I cannot watch a home invasion. I cannot watch that.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that because when I was 7, our home was burglarized. We lived in a very small town, and everybody in the town knew that my mother was in the hospital. And my father and I had gone to Memphis, which is about an hour away from our town, to stay with her in the hospital. And during one weekend, our home was burglarized. I mean, it was bad. And they did mean things, like my mother had some famous art pieces that were framed, and they didn't take them. They slashed them. They killed my dog.
Oh, no. That is trauma to the umpteenth. Yeah, so I totally understand that.
To this day, I think, as much as I love it as a film, and I thought she did a really good job, Jodie Foster, the Panic Room.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it the one time, but I think I hyperventilated, and I was like, never again. I just can't.
And I won't watch them by myself at night because they're too realistic. If it's like a supernatural element to it, like, you know, demons or a haunting or aliens or something like that, then that's totally different.
Oh, I'm all in for that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But like strangers, yeah, he can't do the strangers.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Yeah, I'm that religious horror movie freak. I love all of those. Just keep sending me versions of The Exorcist. That's fine.
We love that.
One thing that I cannot watch because of my childhood situation is I cannot watch torture. So I've never watched Terrifier. I've never watched Saw, those kind of ones. That's the one thing I can't really get into. But my brothers really destroyed me on zombies. They used to play Day of the Dead, and they would chase after me like zombies. So I didn't watch zombie movies. I mean, I saw Return of the Living Dead, and that one was different. But Day of the Dead was one of the most shocking zombie movies I'd ever seen. I think I was probably like 12. So, yeah, I can watch them now, but that was something I could not deal with back in the day.
This is super specific, and I guess it falls into the torture genre, but I really get creeped out when people are being forced to get surgery, having their limbs removed, or that scene. Have you seen House of a Thousand Corpses?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Some body horror, I like David Cronenberg and that kind of stuff. I love that. But the scene where the guy's ribcage is open and his head's open, but he's still alive, especially when somebody's still alive, that gets me.
Yeah, I couldn't watch the end of Braveheart, where he gets completely tortured. So those ones I stay away from, but, you know, I have a pretty big range. I love Dario Argento films. That's something my brother introduced me to that I absolutely love. And yeah, it's comforting.
Yeah. And, you know, occasionally I will force myself to step out of my comfort zone. I think I was actually at a horror convention, and occasionally I'll go by myself and, you know, stay in a room by myself. And I kept hearing about this low budget movie Found. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No.
It's intense. And probably not a movie for you, because, but it's a kid who's obsessed with horror movies finds out his brother is the serial killer, and he lives in the house. And it starts demented. The very last image of the movie is just so bored into your brain. And I'm watching this, like, after I got back from the horror con at, like, midnight by myself on my phone. What is wrong with me? But, yeah. So, beyond horror movies, do you get into horror culture now as well?
As much as I used to. I think I've mellowed with age. My oldest brother, he is huge. He goes to all the horror Comic-Cons. He's written multiple books. He has his own blogs and that kind of thing. So he gets into it.
Oh, you'll have to introduce us.
Yeah. He's great. He's fantastic. He can probably tell you pretty much everything about it.
Very cool. Well, we're recording this in, like, the heat of July here in New England. But we're not launching the show until Friday, September 13th. And this episode will air sometime, hopefully when it's a little bit cooler outside. But this weekend, there's actually a horror convention in Nashua that I'd never heard of before. And this will be Kendall's second horror convention ever, because he's not big into a lot of people. And it's hard for us to get away on the weekends by ourselves just because we have 6 dogs. Yeah.
There you go.
But so I'm curious to and I think it's probably going to be on the smaller side, just curious to see what he thinks. But I'm excited because I just saw that the first con that we ever went to was in Worcester at the DCU Center. That was the weekend that we actually came out to New England and met Kendall's birth family for the first time. And we all went together and all had our picture taken with Kane Hodder. And it was a very special memory of that first weekend of meeting. And there's a band called Ice Nine Kills, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
I actually seen them. Yeah, my son brought me to see them.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Cool.
So they started a horror con a couple years ago, and I guess it's grown, and so they're taking it to the DCU Center this year, and it's actually the weekend of Friday the 13th, and so we're definitely going to be there for that, just to celebrate the launch of the podcast and everything. So if you get a wild hair, Jen, Worcester's not too far from you.
No, it's like about an hour. Yeah, and I'm a driver. I love getting into my car, and my son goes to prep school in Vermont, and it's a 2-hour drive. I love it, and I put on podcasts, all that. So, yeah, I would just please definitely keep me in contact about
Absolutely.
it.
Cool.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your project.
Yes. So, as I've said before, I'm a single mom, and I live with complex PTSD. And one day I was in a therapeutic group, and I was really frustrated with my symptoms. And I was like, I wish I had a monster that I could just rip apart and throw across the room and bang against the wall. And people in the group were like, yeah, you should have that. And I thought about it, and I went home, and I'm not a seamstress, a sewer or anything, but I put together this monster, and I named him PTSD Pete. And his arms and legs and head came off. I made them Velcro. And I used Pete quite a bit, and I thought this would probably help a lot of other people, and especially kids, because as they're growing and learning how to cope with big feelings, I think Moody can be a great buddy for them. So I started in an accelerator program during COVID. We had just closed down, and I started an accelerator program called E4All, and it's in Massachusetts. Anybody who has a business idea, podcast, that kind of thing, it's an insanely excellent program. And I figured out all the things I needed to do and created Moody. And so I've tested Moody, and families love them, therapists love them, teachers are having great response to them in their classrooms. And it's been healing for me as well, because I've really dived into what my healing journey is, and they're a buddy for that for me. And it's something that I can focus on and continue to help others to better understand emotions.
Yeah, I think that's so important when people find that thing that, that can help people, that drives their passion, and they do it. It's like you understand what you went through as a kid, what you go through as an adult with PTSD, and what can I do? What can I do to make a difference? What's something that hasn't been done before? And you did it.
Yes. Yeah. And I love it. Being an entrepreneur is difficult. It's a long journey. And I find myself not being in control of things, which can be triggering. I can't control the loan I'm waiting on. I can't control the order time that I have to do because it's in China. Right. A lot of things about being an entrepreneur are difficult. But again, Moody has been there for me to really focus on what can I do for others while I don't have control of what's happening in my world, right? So I created a YouTube channel that has Moody Talks, and I picked an emotion a month, and I go through what are the words that you use when you think about this emotion, and then go through coping skills that you can use with these different emotions. And so I built a YouTube whole presence while I've been waiting and working and prototyping and all that kind of thing and testing. And yeah, it feels really good to be able to put that out there, the things that have worked for me, and help others to understand their own emotions. Because we were not taught to show our emotions. I was not. And I feel like Gen X was, I mean, we weren't even listened to. We were told not to be an angry child, not to make people uncomfortable with our feelings. So we shoved them down and had to find other ways to cope with it.
Yeah.
Very true.
What do your kids think about Moody?
They're good. They're 20 and 17 now. They've used him every once in a while, but yeah, they're not into the whole helping mom. Not that they're bad children, but they're, oh no, that's your thing. That's your thing. You do it. But my oldest, when he was young, I wish he had a Moody because he had a lot of emotional issues and he would go into huge, he'd be ripping things apart, hitting people, that kind of thing. But at the end of it, he'd go into a shame spiral. And after a while, that can be really hard on a child. It can turn toxic. So I wished that he had something like a Moody that would have helped him to get out that pent-up frustration without feeling like a bad boy with that toxic shame.
Right. Do they share your love of horror?
My youngest, nope. And I think I did that because I showed him Gremlins when I think he was like 9 or 10. And again, I don't consider Gremlins a horror movie, but I guess it is. And but he refuses to watch horror at all. He refuses it. My older, he's more interested in it, but it's more along the lines, can I get him to sit down and watch with me? It's like a special moment if he's going to.
What are your hopes and dreams for Moody?
Oh, I have so many plans for Moody. I plan on other dolls. I'd love to create dolls that are based on diagnoses like ADHD and autism. And I want to be able to create books that talk about those diagnoses in a way that a younger child or an adolescent might be able to better understand why they got this diagnosis and that it doesn't mean that they're bad, right? I would love to create like a Calm app that has all of the coping skills that I've talked about in an app so that parents can give their phone to a child who is having a hard time. And they can find the coping skill that they need in that moment. And then finally, I want to make a monster so much. That is my ultimate dream, is so that kids and parents or whoever wants to buy a Moody can choose the touch, the feel, the fabrics, what they look like. And that is my hope, that I will have make a monster in the future.
That's cool. Awesome. Love that. Love that. But the final question that we always ask our guests, and I have a gut feeling, I think I already know what you're going to say based on what you said earlier, but who is your favorite final person in a horror movie?
I'd say Ash. I love Ash. Everything about the Evil Dead series, I have a Funko Pop of him that my son bought me. I mean, like everybody knows that Ash is my absolute favorite hero.
See, I thought you were going to say Sally just based on Texas Chainsaw being your favorite flick.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the two different Evil Deads, the first and the second, they're so different, but it's him. It's who he is that I think is what draws to him.
Definitely.
But Sally's a great second.
Definitely an iconic character, Ash, and an iconic actor, Bruce Campbell. Yeah. I mean, he's become a legend in the world of horror. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. He's amazing.
Jen, we so appreciate you opening up, sharing your story. We love Moody. We're going to hold you to coming to the con with us, so stay tuned. We'll be in touch.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome.
Absolutely.
We're also excited that Jennifer actually lives pretty near us, so we're excited to get to spend time with her.
As you just heard, we're going to hold Jennifer's feet to the fire and make sure she goes to a horror convention with us very soon. We also want to give a shout out to our friend Andy Lyons, who introduced us to Jennifer. Andy was the co-founder of New England Podcasters Group, a group that we are members of. Just very, very cool people. Andy has been so welcoming and supportive of this podcast before it even launched. So Andy, thank you so much for introducing us to Jennifer. It's always wonderful to make a new friend, and we definitely feel like we have to with you and Jennifer.